Good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of Tisky Sour. I'm Michael Walker, speaking to you in quarantine from my living room in East London. We have done many shows recently about coronavirus and COVID-19. We've moved Tisky Sour to become nightly and sort of covered it from every angle one could imagine. Tonight we are going to talk about something completely different, and that is because a topic very close to the hearts of us at Novara Media, the Labour Party, the internal disputes that have gone on. And it turns out the quite extreme efforts at sabotage that were taking place, in particular between 2015 and 2017. Much of that has come to light in a new leaked report. The context of this report was the Equalities and Human Rights Commission investigation into the Labour Party for anti-Semitism. The Labour Party has put together sort of its main submission to them, which we haven't seen, but this was supposed to be a sort of addendum to talk about the extent of factionalism in the Labour Party and how this crisis cannot be understood without understanding to some degree the importance of internal politics in the Labour Party. But I mean, there's some real juicy nuggets in there as well. To talk about this, I am joined by Aaron Bastani, who I think has spent the last 48 hours poring over these documents, and you've already written one article about them, haven't you?
I have. You can see I'm not shaven. Yeah, we've got a few more coming out in the next couple of days. Didn't really sleep much Sunday morning, Saturday evening. I received the document Saturday day, and I was told, obviously, Sky went with it Saturday evening. But sorry, I should have brought a glass of water in. One thing is that when these kinds of documents get out there, and it was leaked, it's very different to talk about leaking a document and publishing a document. If you publish a document legally, you're responsible for it in quite different ways. Of course, if you leak it, you're also responsible for it, depending on who you are. These are two separate things. But what we know is, in the age of WhatsApp, back channels, etc., screenshots, mobile internet, the second it was out there, it wasn't going to stay hidden for much longer. And so worked overnight, got the story out. I think we got it at 4 p.m. Sunday, and it's just blown up. Justifiably, it's a huge story.
And again, how this show is going to be structured. The first half, me and Aaron are going to sort of talk you through the document. What are the main revelations? Oftentimes it's sort of confirming stuff that we, kind of already suspected, but it's good to have it down in writing. Some of it is, I think, genuinely surprising in, how sociopathic some people can be. I'm supposed to put it, well, I stand by that, in fact. In the second half of the show, we are going to be speaking to Jon Lansman, NEC member, one of the directors of Momentum, and someone who knows more about internal Labour Party politicking than probably anyone else in the country. I can't think of anyone else with a more encyclopedic knowledge of how the internal politics of the Labour Party works. We're going to get his perspective, talk about what the consequences of this document could be, or its leaking, and sort of the broader issues it opens up in Labour Party politics. Before we get on to that, though, you're watching Tisky Sour, you're watching Novara Media. Please tweet on the hashtag Tisky Sour with your questions, your comments. We'll sort of pop into those throughout the show. Also, we want to get more people watching this, so retweet the description in the YouTube under the YouTube video, and that will get more people over here, because I think we're going to be talking about things today that I think more people should know about, because I suppose, as Aaron's probably going to mention at some point, there are parts of the mainstream media that have been quite reluctant to discuss the contents of this document, and you can make of that what you will. I wanted to introduce a discussion of this document by sort of laying out, or by quoting, what the people who've written it have said is the purpose. Because I've already seen, I just saw, Stephen Bush was a reasonable article, but he seemed to be suggesting that what this report was trying to do was say that anti-Semitism was not the fault of the Corbyn faction in the Labour Party.
That's not what it said.
And it didn't prove that. No, but that's not what the report said, right?
No, I know, but I normally judge Stephen Bush as actually quite a sort of.
I might have in a way butchered his piece, but in any case, I think he was overstating what he said it had done, and actually, I think the intentions of this report are much more modest and incredibly reasonable, in fact. So I want to get up a couple of quotes from the beginning of it. So it says, we hope, this is from page 22, we hope the EHRC, so the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, will focus on the documentary primary source evidence that the party has made available to it, emails, messages, and documents from the time, rather than the personal accounts of staff or former staff. We hope the EHRC will question the validity of the personal testimonies where these present a narrative which is directly contradicted by available documentary evidence from the time of the events in question. And so I think basically the point is to say, if you are investigating a party which during this period of time was in a complete internal factional civil war, either people from the left or people from the right, you should think about where are they coming from with the claims they are making, and that's why primary documentary evidence is much more important than interviews. And as we have seen over the past 5 years, so much coverage of the issue of anti-Semitism and the Labour Party has been based on testimony by people who just happen to be and always have been, very, very committed in their opposition to Jeremy Corbyn and left-wingers within the Labour Party. And obviously, we've said many, many times on this show, that's not all there was to the row over anti-Semitism, but that was a part of it which was not only underplayed by the media, but if me or Aaron as commentators, if we were ever to suggest, well, because someone said it, it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. And you have to understand that there is a political context to everything that goes on in the Labour Party. You'd get shouted down, like what you'd said is completely unacceptable. So it is good to have it down in writing what was going on. Let's go. I've sort of broken it down into sections. So I think some of the first headlines are the most sort of striking elements of this document were about party staffers, and often quite high-level party staffers, undermining Labour's electoral chances and being incredibly disappointed whenever Labour did well and pleased when they did badly. We're also going to talk about some of the bullying and racism and, really awful things that were said by some people in incredibly senior positions within the Labour Party. And then we're going to talk a bit about how this all relates to the anti-Semitism row, to the extent that some of the people who have been most vocal in their criticisms of Corbyn's handling of anti-Semitism themselves had a tendency to sit on complaints and, quite obviously, make the problem worse, because one of the big problems in terms of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party was how long it took to deal with certain complaints. And there are some people who have been very keen to criticize Corbyn who've sat on complaints for a hell of a long time. We'll start with the 2017 general election, though. So in the general election, one of the revelations that this document makes is that there was basically a bit of a parallel operation going on in Labour Party HQ, and they had set up what seems like a sort of a secret building to fund contests in seats where they were ideologically aligned to the person who was sitting there, not directing money based on where they thought Labour had the best chances of beating Conservatives. So it was sort of a factional parallel operation, or at least that's the suggestion. So we're going to go to some of these quotes now. So actually, I should probably introduce that a lot of this document is based on WhatsApp chats. So WhatsApp group chats between different people in HQ, and these WhatsApp chats were often, organized by a different department in HQ or via factional allegiances within HQ. And in each of these cases, someone within that WhatsApp group exported the entire chat, often over a period of a couple of years, to the people who wrote this document. So it's all, it's interesting because as you read it, it often has, shocking things combined with emojis.
Can I clarify that, Michael?
Yeah, go on.
Because obviously the emails is slightly more explicable and understandable, in terms of you could scrape data or whatever. And by the way, in terms of technically how this is operated, we have no idea. I was passed this document by somebody who has absolutely nothing to do with, I can only presume they're not the person that leaked it because they have nothing to do with the Labour Party. They could have been an intermediary or whatever. But we can only surmise in terms of how this was gathered. You'd think, well, how did they get the WhatsApp stuff? That's particularly curious because WhatsApp's are private, closed groups. But it seems to be the way that it's been captured is that one of the people in this group wanted to have leverage over other members of the group in the future. This is the kind of personality you're dealing with. And so, like you said, they basically got an archive of all the chats. They emailed it to themselves on a Labour Party account. That's the only way that my source, who I've said is not in any way associated with the Labour Party, thinks that they could have got this data. That's the only way. And that really tells you about the kinds of people we're talking about. Even close friends, associates are thinking, well, I'll basically download all this. I'll have so much crap on X, Y, Z that in the future it might be of some help. Who on earth thinks like that?
And you think they downloaded it to their Labour Party? So I thought that someone in these WhatsApp groups sort of had switched sides, as it were, but in the factional disputes in the Labour Party.
As far as I can understand, it could be wrong. You know, we're privy to a few different. First of all, it's important to say when we published the article we did publish on Sunday, we basically reached out to multiple people. We ensured that everything we were saying was factually correct and so on. It seems the only way this could have happened was by somebody trying to archive their WhatsApp messages. That's the only way it could have happened.
All right, let's go to the secret group during the general election. This is just one example of sort of how people in HQ were behaving in ways that one would not expect them to. So this is on page 92 of the report. We're always going to tell you the page numbers because if you happen to have a copy, you might want to reference it. So in this general election, Labour HQ assigned resources in a factional manner and hid this from Lotto, the leader of the opposition's office. So in May 27, they HQ assigned staff to a secret key seats team. So it's not particularly subtly named, which all happened in Ergon House, and all secret to the leader of the opposition's office. So some WhatsApp chats here. Catherine Bramwell, so staffer. There is a secret key seats team arriving in Ergon House permanently. Ooh, interesting on the key seats team. Who will be part of it? Lots of secret meetings going on here. I think it's all secret to Lotto. I'll let you know, but think it's a brand new team moving in on Sunday. Brill, I endorse this plan and will keep said plan V much to myself. So the report goes on to say both Sam Matthews, head of disputes, and Sophie Goodyear, head of safeguarding and complaints, worked on this project. So you've got top people who are working in secret to the leader of the Labour Party, directing money to seats, which it seems to be based purely on a factional level. So they were funding people like Tom Watson and Yvette Cooper, so people who were in safe-ish seats, but there was some fear that they could lose. Obviously, Tom Watson's seat has now gone Conservative, but they were also funneling this money to people like Angela Eagle, Heidi Alexander Chukwuemeka in Streatham, one of the biggest majorities in the country, and Rachel Reeves. And they threw, so then one of the people they were most concerned to save, again, this is people who don't seem to be prioritizing winning majority for the Labour Party, but saving their particular factional allies and using staff time and staff and party money to do it. So on the 22nd of April, senior staff discussed the need to protect Tom Watson's seat in West Bromwich, which he, in the end, won with a 58%, 58% of the vote. So Patrick Hannigan, and we'll sort of introduce you to some of these characters as we go along as well. So Patrick Hannigan is Executive Director of Elections and Campaigns. So in the Labour Party, you have the General Secretary at the top. Underneath them, you have the Executive Directors, and they're the most powerful people in the party other than the General Secretary. And Seamus Milne is one, Executive Director of Communications and Strategy, I suppose. Patrick Hannigan, who you'll see a lot of, he was Executive Director of Campaigns and Elections. And Emily Oldknow, who you'll see a lot of as well. She was Executive Director of, what was her title? It's the one that's sort of complaints and...
Emily Oldknow.
Yeah, what's her actual title?
You carry on, I'll pull it up. The dramatis personae of this is key.
Sorry, Governance, Membership and Party Services.
Yeah.
So Patrick Hannigan, Executive Director, Elections, Campaigns and Organising. Emily Oldknow, Executive Director of Governance, Membership and Party Services. So this is them talking about protecting Watson. Patrick Hannigan, so this is graphic 1B. Okay, we need to throw cash at Tom's seat, even if it's just 50k for that. Emily Oldknow, we should do this. Patrick Hannigan, we can't let them lose for want of money. We're in meltdown, 25 points down, and they've not started on us. And then Ian McNichol, let's talk Monday. I'm off to bed, but obviously protect Tom's seat. So this is the General Secretary of the Labour Party, who is also talking about pumping money into a seat to defend a factional ally. And in case you're thinking like, oh, maybe the reason they want to protect Tom Watson's seat is because they do care about a general election victory, but also, obviously he's the deputy leader of the Labour Party. So maybe you have a sympathetic reading of this and you think this might not be that cynical at all. Maybe they had the best of intentions. Let's look at how they all responded when Labour did surprisingly well. So these were people in charge of the election campaign and we're going to go have a look at a chat as to how they responded again. So I'll remind you, Patrick Hennigan, Executive Director of Elections Campaigns and Organising. He was in charge of the general election campaign. And I looked it up on his LinkedIn. On his LinkedIn, he describes his job as playing the leading role in the organisation and delivery of the 2017 general election campaign. So it's not subtle or ambiguous what the purpose of his job was. So now let's go to their chat once the exit poll has come in. So Julie Lawrence. Patrick, if anyone in War Room needs some safe space time, they can come to GSO, so the General Secretary's office. Tracy Allen, more like in need of counselling. Emily Oldknow, who, as we said, is Executive Director for Governance, Membership and Party Services. What's the atmosphere like there? Simon Mills, depending which side of the building. Patrick Hennigan, who is in charge of the election campaign. Awful. Help. Simon Mills, split between euphoria and shock. Oh, I don't need to read you all the names. Julie Lawrence, we are stunned and reeling. Tracy Allen, they are cheering and we are silent and grey-faced. Probably the best line in the chat. Opposite to what I had been working towards for the last couple of years. So this is a chat of people with top jobs in the Labour Party, and they're explicitly saying they have been working for the last couple of years to make sure Labour never do well in a general election. Emily Oldknow, we have to be upbeat and not show it. And at least we have loads of money now. Julie Lawrence, not if we go into a coalition and lose short money. Steve, walking the floor. Patrick Hennigan, I'm going into room of death. Ian McNichol, it's going to be a long night. Aaron, what do you make of this? The people who were, getting paid quite handsome salaries by the Labour Party after the exit poll results from a general election come in, where where the Labour Party have performed surprisingly well, phenomenally well, a 10-point increase from 30% in 2015 to 40% in 2017 against all expectations.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you make of it, that this was the reactions of two executive directors and other people with high-powered positions in the Labour Party and the General Secretary?
Yeah, the General Secretary and two directors. These are, bear in mind, all these WhatsApp conversations are from what's called the SMT group, the Senior Management Team group. This should be the most senior group of people in the Parliament, in the Labour Party, outside the Parliamentary Labour Party, of course. The two other people there that their titles have not been given, they were working in Ian McNichol's office. What you see in those conversations is effectively a parallel structure, a party within a party, revolving around Oldknow, Hennigan, elsewhere John Stolliday, and also Ian McNichol and Tom Watson. This was a party within a party. If we can go back to the first bit of that conversation. Okay, you can see, as Michael's already said, awful, help. Tracy Allen is one of the people who works in the McNichol office. She's saying opposite to what I had been working towards for the last couple of years. We go to the next slide, please. We have to be upbeat and not show. Now, this is critical. This is really critical. Emily Oldknow is now at Unison. She's an assistant general secretary there. She has been widely tipped as Keir Starmer's number one choice to be the Labour Party's general secretary to replace Jenny Formby. And you can see what she says here. We have to be upbeat and not show it. There's a level of dissimulation and lies, fundamentally, which is quite remarkable. And then she looks at the upside. At least we have loads of money now. And we're going to have to disagree about this, perhaps, Michael. This is the worst line for me. Julie Lawrence, not if we go into coalition and lose short money. Julie Lawrence, who works for Ian McNichol, is explicitly stating that the worst possible thing that can now happen is for the Labour Party to enter government. Her colleague says, well, the upside is we have more money. She goes, no, we won't have more money because we'll lose the short money because we'll be in government. Why are all these people working for the Labour Party if they don't want the Labour Party to be in government? Why are MPs in Parliament for Labour if they don't want to be MPs in a governing Labour Party? Why are people canvassing on doors, knocking on doors, paying money to travel around the country, taking time off, working unpaid to get people elected to change the policies of this country? Why are we doing all of this stuff? I mean, I was canvassing for Labour in 2017. Why are people doing all of this if actually the people at the very top don't want to win? I mean, it's absolutely remarkable. And we'll talk about it a little bit later on. Yeah, the media have not really picked. I mean, they're having to because it's just such a huge story. I saw some of the comments when I said it's really blown up. Not many stories on the Novara media site get, around 200,000 views in about 24 hours. It's a big story. And when something's that big, coupled with, of course, as we were talking about, people, sharing screen grabs and so on through WhatsApp, You can't measure how big that gets. We have no idea because it's all private channels. That is a fundamentally terrifying story of the party of opposition and the people running it not wanting to actually be the government. That is anathema to our entire democratic system. It's a huge, huge scandal. And it's so big, inevitably, eventually, the people who will never want to cover these things because they're embroiled with these very same people, they're going to have to cover it because it's a story of fundamental national significance.
Well, also, I mean, as I was saying earlier, like even at the time, so this is all happening in 2017. At the time, during that general election, we'd be talking on Novara media about how, you know, there was internal civil war going on in the party, and we're not sure if the people in HQ are really going to be working towards the party's interests. That was called a bunker mentality, conspiratorial. You know, how dare you question the motives of party staff? And we should have a look at as well how these people were covered by the media at the time. Because whilst these people, it seems, were actively working to undermine Labour's electoral chances, they were still presented as the most important people in the party, who were the only ones keeping the show moving, and making it electorally competent, even though they were working in the opposite direction. I just want to go to one of the worst examples of this. As this is about Emmy Oldknow, you've seen the quotes at the time. She left the party in 2018 to work at Unison. Potentially, people are saying she might come back as Keir Starmer's pick for General Secretary. I imagine these revelations will probably make that much more difficult than it would have been. But this is Kevin Schofield at Politics Home. Headline, fresh blow for Labour as senior official dubbed brains of the party quits. And the subheading, a senior Labour official dubbed the brains of the party has dramatically quit her job. And we can go to these graphics. Kevin Schofield is the king of reprinting dumb WhatsApps that he's got from like a has-been Labour right MP, and this is a perfect example of that. Senior party sources said Miss Oldknow's decision to quit was a hammer blow for Labour. One told Politics Home, this is the brains and the muscles of the organisation leaving. That's it for the Labour Party. So this is someone who, after the general election, when we did quite well, was saying we have to pretend to not be incredibly miserable so that people don't have proof that we actually wanted the party to lose. That's it for the Labour Party. Actually, these people leaving the Labour Party was necessary, and I would say one of the best things that happened to it, but obviously it didn't go that well afterwards. But they were one of many things holding back the party at this point in time.
Well, can I just say before we carry on, you're saying it didn't go well afterwards because, as we'll see, I actually feel sorry. One of the things as I was going through this report and writing the piece, I feel sorry for the People's Vote campaign. Because what it became was a lifeboat. Actually, I think two people
for all of these people, yeah. Patrick Hannigan went to the People's Vote.
Yeah, campaign. A couple of them. I think John Stollade as well. Maybe that may not be correct. I think it was John Stollade. It was a couple of them.
I think that's true.
Yeah, and they went to work. These are talentless, malicious, horrible people, and they actually made the People's Vote campaign, inevitably about just undermining Jeremy Corbyn and destroying Labour in any general election. And I feel so sorry for people that really believed it was about a second referendum. I'm sure many people involved in it were involved because of those reasons. But it became a lifeboat for apparatchiks, effectively, who were now no longer provided with a career by the Labour Party, who wanted to earn a living. And they did so by fundamentally destroying this movement. It was a movement, the movement for a second referendum. I didn't support it because I didn't think the electoral calculus added up. But look, it's a democracy. People can do what they like. But the individuals at the top of that who are also involved in this, people like Patrick Hannigan, my God.
So Patrick Hannigan went on to be director of the People's Vote campaign. John Stollade was head of strategic communications until March 2009 when he moved to Unison. We should go probably quite quickly to some of the most shocking ones, which is sort of like the racism and the bullying. And yeah, let's do that now. Because I mean, there's so much in here, but I'm also conscious that we want to get Jon Lansman in to talk about what this all means. There's enough material in here for about 3 shows, really, isn't there? I mean, it's 860 pages long, and
that's when I first saw it. I said,
bad behaviour.
Yeah. When I first saw it, I was like, there are 60 articles in here. There are 70 articles.
Actually, no, there is one bit more I want to read from that article. It's too funny. Okay, so this is so that Philip Schofield article also contained what was Emily Oldknow's email to all staffers talking about her leaving. And I want to get up a quote from this. So it's graphic 3D. So the political books and newspaper clippings rarely mention the heroic efforts of party staff who each day go to work with one simple objective: to help secure the election of a Labour government. That is not the objective you went to work with. You went to work with the objective to save a few right-wing MPs from losing, and were incredibly disappointed when Labour had the chance potentially to form a government. So just the duplicity here is unbelievable.
Can I know we've just said we want to carry on, but can we actually just go to one more image, which is, or do you want to go through all of them? Because for me, the funniest one of all is from Lucy Fisher.
Let's keep going through another. Let's keep going through another one. Right. Let's go to Free C. Oh, actually, this one is hilarious as well.
Lucy Fisher's crazy.
Let's go to Graphic Free C first, because this is another from Kevin Schofield's piece. Another party insider said, politicians may grab the headlines, but it's Emily and her team who have kept the show on the road the last few years. Difficult to see where the party goes next. It's like these were people who wanted the Labour Party to lose. Difficult to see where the party goes next. Jesus Christ.
Well, we know where they wanted it to go next, which was they wanted to carry on what they'd already done, except rather than pissing inside the tent, they'd have to do it outside the tent. In the case of the two gentlemen we talked about who went on to work for the People's Vote campaign.
All right, you wanted to get up the Lucy Fisher tweet. So Lucy Fisher is at the Times or Sky, is she?
Times. I think defence correspondent.
So she's written, we'll get that one up. Major departure from Labour. Exec Director Emily Oldknow has quit ahead of new Gensec, likely to be Jenny Formby appointment. Senior party sources say it's a massive loss and predict she won't be the last to go. Oldknow was key moderate who oversaw HR and compliance.
I mean, this is one thing you want to take out of this entire story is that journalists on your Twitter feed with blue ticks, people that write in the newspapers, many people that go on television. I mean, there are some exceptions. Sky broke this story, as I've said. But many of them are actually like Kevin Schofield. Many of them are the last people you should trust in terms of maintaining journalistic integrity.
All right, let's go to the bit about racism and bullying, because this is, I think this is what shocked people most on Twitter, as well as, obviously party staff trying to actively undermine the electoral chances. These were the most shocking. So I want to go to graphic 4A. Top members of party staff fought about Diane Abbott. Not just fought, actually acted. So Mulholland as PLP secretary was the main liaison between MPs and the Labour Party. In February 2017, she said, Diane Abbott literally makes me sick. In the same WhatsApp group, senior staff discussed Abbott crying in the toilets and telling Michael Crick, a Channel 4 reporter at the time, where she was. And now let's go to their WhatsApp chat, which is actually sickening. Okay, so Patrick Hannigan. Abbott found crying in the loos. Julie Lawrence, a sort of crying emoji. Tracy Allen. Abbott Memorial Cupboard works well. Patrick Hannigan, Diane in Leon on Vic Street. Fiona Stanton, shall we tell Michael Crick? Patrick Hannigan, already have. So this is someone, he's an executive director of the Labour Party who is telling people the location of Diane Abbott when she's been crying in the toilet. Before I bring you in, Aaron, I want to show what was potentially the context of Diane Abbott crying in a toilet. Now, I mean, it's common knowledge that she received more abuse, racist, sexist, awful abuse over the last 4 years than any other politician in Britain. Disgusting stuff. But it is worth checking the dates of when this conversation happened and what was in the news on that day or the following day, what was going on that week. So this conversation was going on the 8th of March 2017. I'm going to get up a Guardian article from the 8th of February 2017. I'm going to get up a Guardian article from the 9th of February 2017. Headline: Conservative official suspended over racist tweet aimed at Diane Abbott. The context of that tweet, you've got a local Conservative official was suspended from the party for retweeting a message aimed at Diane Abbott that had been, they say, described as racist, but it was, I think that's a bit bad from the Guardian, really. So he had tweeted, done a tweet portraying Abbott, the Shadow Home Secretary, as an ape wearing lipstick. And he posted, nice lips, kid, but a shade too much rouge. Disgusting. But anyway, this is a quote that I thought was incredibly relevant to what's going on here. So the controversy emerged as it was revealed that a female staff member in Abbott's team wrote to the Metropolitan Police about another threatening and racist message sent this week. Abbott would not comment on the police complaint, which was leaked to The Guardian, but sources confirmed that it had been sent. The worker claimed that death and rape threats and offensive messages focusing on race and weight were now a daily occurrence for the Shadow Home Secretary. So that week, Diane Abbott, her team had to write to the Metropolitan Police about another message which was threatening violence, threatening rape. And obviously Diane Abbott is quite rightly upset about this. And what do you do as director for campaigns of the Labour Party? You tell a Channel 4 journalist where she's getting her lunch. Leon is a cafe, it's a restaurant. So he's telling journalists to go and follow Diane Abbott, who's getting more abuse than any other politician in this country, to follow her when she goes for lunch and making jokes when she's upset in a toilet. It's disgusting. It's horrific.
It's harassment. It's targeted. It's a targeted campaign of harassment, partly by Twitter trolls and the far right and so on, partly by the media. You always want a story. Oh, maybe we can break the Shadow Home Secretary as a human being. Of course, far more interesting for them because she's a black woman who has left-wing views. But then it's aided and abetted by people within her own organisation, people who are meant to have her back, people who are paid to have her back. And it's remarkable. How dare anybody in the Labour Party say they're the party of anti-misogyny, anti-racism? How dare they? Not even a Tory would sink this low. People said, "Oh, I saw Owen Jones make a tweet. This is what the Tories do." No, they don't. The Bullingdon Club wouldn't do this to their own. It's absolutely despicable. Not one ounce of loyalty or integrity from these people. Disgusting, malevolent stuff. And people like hyperbole. People love superlatives. How else would you like to characterize this? Somebody, and this, by the way, this gentleman has an OBE. He has an OBE and he's a director of the Labour Party. And he's telling, not just any old journalist, somebody who we know is a very hostile political journalist, at I think time was political editor of Channel 4, Michael Crick, to find out where the Shadow Home Secretary is. This person isn't just not welcome in the Labour Party, shouldn't just not work for them. They're an abhorrent human being. They really need to look in the mirror.
And I mean, when I tweeted this yesterday, Abby Wilkinson, a journalist and friend of the show, she tweeted under it like, "I wouldn't do this to my worst enemy." Yeah. It's sort of like political enmity cannot explain this behavior. This behavior is like sociopathic. It's just, and anyway, let's go to now Dawn Butler, because it obviously wasn't just Diane Abbott. Let's go to graphic 6. So this is from October 2016. Emily Oldknow again. Dawn Butler. So this is when she's just been appointed to the shadow cabinet. Can we get this one up? Graphic 6. So then Neil Fleming, acting head of press and broadcasting. Yep. PLP women will go spare. Emily Oldknow. Good grief. Claire Francis Fuller. Did she not accuse the LP and its staff of being racist this week? Nice. Emily Oldknow. Harriet White Privilege Harmon. Now, I mean, that conversation would look dismissive and ridiculous enough as it is. But given that the people in that conversation, that we also now can see, were pointing out where the person subject to the most racism of any politician in the country was having lunch so that a journalist can follow them, to then think that, Labour Party staff, it would be ridiculous to question whether or not they're anti-racists, is, more than a little ironic, isn't it, Aaron?
But yeah, and also look, I mean, sometimes you have to take stock, and you go, you look around the room, you go, oh wow, we're mostly middle-aged white people, white guys. Actually, one of the astonishing things in this report was Emily Oldknow, who's a woman, is repeatedly abusive about other women. Misogynoir isn't just limited to men. It can be internalized by women. And this is a classic example of that. But more horrific is seeing men, John Stolliday, Hennigan, it's 2 or 3 men, repeatedly denigrate women. Carrie Murphy was in one, Diane Abbott's another, using the most violent language imaginable. Now, when a man uses violent language about women repeatedly, again, it goes beyond a political or a factional point, right? What kind of psychological mindset is at work here? Maybe I don't think this is about left and right. And I'm not trying to win people over to my side of the debate here by, trying to reach out. It's not ideological. Anybody that uses that kind of violent, aggressive language about women repeatedly, particularly women of color, I think they have significant problems. And they certainly shouldn't be working in a progressive party. And they certainly shouldn't try and adorn themselves the mask of anti-racism. And it's just, again, it's, repulsive.
All right, let's go to, there's so many examples. Let's just do 2 more examples of how sort of childish these people are. Because I think when we get John in, we're going to discuss sort of like what explains this sort of behavior, and what does it say actually about the Labour Party that these are the people who ended up having very high powered jobs in it, because these are people that, I wouldn't really want running any organization, let alone the organization which is supposed to be the future of social democracy, and the future and present, the main representatives of progressive politics in this country, to be run by people like this.
Yeah.
And I want to just bring up one more to sort of show how this isn't just factional. It's just like who are these people? So this is Emily Oldknow again, Graphic 7A, who is, let's remind you, executive director of the Labour Party for Governance. So she's the person she's the top dog when it comes to dealing with complaints. She's the buck stops with her. Let's get up this conversation about Carrie Murphy and Katie Clark. Emily Oldknow, fuck off, pube head. I'm too busy slagging you off. Mike Creighton, can I just point out from my sickbed there's too much disparaging talk about old folk on this timeline. Salt of the earth, don't you know? Tracy Allen. Who is pube head? Emily Oldknow. To talk to you about John Trickett's diary, Katie. Also, they were calling Katie Clark pube head. Now let's go to Graphic 7B. Again, they're talking about Katie Clark. Emily Oldknow. Katie Clark had the exact same clothes on yesterday. Smelly cow. Tracy Allen. Didn't she do that at conference too? Emily Oldknow. Yes, same clothes, 4 days. Patrick Hennigan. Probably slept in them. Disgusting. Emily Oldknow. Carrie is fat too. There's a good old roll in that photo. Like, this is... I've heard people say, look, this is a WhatsApp chat, and people chat shit on WhatsApp chats. And it's, potentially... sometimes I say some things on WhatsApp chats that are a bit politically incorrect or something, and I wouldn't publish it publicly on Twitter. But what the fuck adult writes this shit? Because it's not even, it's not funny. Like, if you've got a sort of, if you're doing some banter on a WhatsApp chat and someone says something rude about someone, you're like, oh, well, at least that was witty. Oh, I wouldn't say that in public. But this is just like, are these people 14? No, they're executive directors of Britain's main progressive party.
I mean, and I know what you're saying. And this isn't us trying to, this is cancel culture. This is not cancel culture. This is not about, there's a distinction between what you would publish publicly or privately, which, like you say, Michael, is a thing. On WhatsApp, I'll be saying, oh, you fancy this or that person. That's what people do. Like, you would say the same to me. You'd say something silly. This is...
I think that's making the WhatsApp chat sound a bit more innocent. Like, you fancy this person. People are... Like, you might be rude about other people, but just not in this...
Well, we're not.
Childish...
No, well,
we don't say anything like this.
I mean, I might go, God, that guy's fucking ridiculous. I mean, okay, everybody does that. But like you say, it's like...
I don't call people fat and ugly, pube. It's like, what? I mean, maybe I would have done when I was 14, but then I would have been like...
Even then, people would have been like, 14-year-old Michael, that's really mean. That's really mean.
Yeah, exactly.
Pube. I mean, like...
And this was a person in charge of how people should behave in the Labour Party.
Yeah.
Who hasn't moved on from being like a really awful 14-year-old.
With an OBE. How does that happen?
Oh, there are over 3,000 of you watching, which is fabulous. We want to keep doing these shows, make them more often. As you've probably noticed, no one else is really covering this story, which, I mean, one I think is big because the way the Labour Party has been covered over the past 5 years, where anytime anyone has said, oh, the leadership have a bunker mentality, why are they so conspiratorial about the people? Like, this proves all of those points. So it's a big political story. Also, I think it's an interesting story. Like, how has it been the case that a major political party can be run by people like this? It's an interesting story. We want to do more shows, so please go to support.novaramedia.com. Although actually we've changed it now to novaramedia.com/support. Very similar. I think they both take you to the same page, but we've moved to that one anyway. Make sure you like the show. Keep your comments coming. Keep your hashtags coming. We are now going to bring in Jon Lansman. Are you there? Can we get Lansman in?
Hi.
Hiya, Jon. Sorry we kept you for a while. There was just so much material to work with. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm keeping well. I happen to be in Cornwall, where my daughter lives. Came in for the weekend when it all started, just before it kicked off. And
yeah, it's lucky. It's good you put that qualification in there. You're not supposed to go to Cornwall for the weekend, but it's before the lockdown. We should clarify.
Before the lockdown, so I've been here for several weeks.
Yeah,
and my daughter lives here, so unfortunately, I haven't seen her or my grandchildren very much, other than through the window. But there you are.
I had a Zoom with my parents today as well. My sister's got her first newborn, so it's their first grandchild, and they just coo over the Zoom, and it's very cute. But it is a shame they can't be there in person.
Yeah.
To the meat of the show, I'll start with a general question. I mean, what do you make of this leak of this document? I suppose the circumstances of its becoming public, what it contains, and what are your main takeaways?
It was just really shocking, horrifying reading. I mean, I can understand why, talking about it in the way that you have been, some of it seems funny, but actually it's deadly serious and really depressing. And to see these things coming, in black and white, coming from the mouths of people who, when I first got elected to the NEC, sitting around that table, giving us advice, it's very, very depressing.
And what I suppose, what does it say about the Labour Party that these are the people who rose to the top of it? Like, I know you've been following that. You're so committed to the Labour Party. Like, I feel like you live and breathe the Labour Party. How does it make you feel to know that these were the people who got promoted to the very top?
Well, look, in one sense, it's not a surprise that there are such people. I've been in the Labour Party a long time. For decades, I felt incredibly marginalised within the party. There was a lot of hatred towards the left from the right of the party. So it's not surprising that it's still there. But people at the very top of the party who, some of whom, by the way, not all of them, but some of them have always treated me politely and behaved in a friendly way. And I tend to treat people who treat me politely and friendly that way myself. But to see what they're saying about friends of mine is quite horrific. And to think that you're in the same party, that, whatever our disagreements, we all want to see a Labour government, and to see that actually some people are actively working against the possibility of having a Labour government. I worked for Labour governments when Tony Blair was leader, and I stayed in the party. I never left. It was extremely hard, and I came quite close to leaving, but I stayed. And I always had the view that a Labour government was better than a Tory government, and that's why. And I didn't see a better option. And to see people who are at the very top, who earn big salaries for the senior positions they have in the Labour Party, who appear to have been actively working against the interests of the Labour Party in a general election, to be pleased when we were doing badly and happy when we were pleased when we were doing badly and happy and unhappy when we were doing well, is just shocking.
And I mean, most of these people don't work for the Labour Party now, right? So in a way, we've got this information now, but no one can really lose their jobs because of it, because everyone's already left. So I mean, so what do you see as the key outcomes which are going to be from this now becoming public? Obviously, as I've said before, there were, many people on the left were suspicious that this kind of thing was going on, but now that there's proof, now that it's out in the open, what consequences might it have?
Well, I don't envy Keir his task. Because Keir has said that he wants to unite the party, that he wants an end to factionalism, and I think those are very worthy objectives. But it's clear that a lot of work needs to be done. I think we really need a kind of truth and reconciliation process. You've got to rebuild trust if you want to unite the party, and that certainly needs to be done. I think the other thing we've got to do is to make sure that party staff are impartial. Okay, they're bound to have their own opinions. And that's okay. They're members of the Labour Party. They're political. They're entitled to be political as much as any other member of the Labour Party. But professionally, we expect them to be professional. And that means being impartial and being guardians of the internal democracy of the party. And that means whether Jeremy Corbyn or Keir Starmer win leadership elections, that's who they work for as leader. Well, they work for the party as a whole, actually. In many ways, I think they should regard themselves as working for the members and the affiliates. And unfortunately, this report shows that that isn't what has happened.
I know this report was written up that was written up by the governance and legal unit in the party. So sort of, and in a way, it was sort of writing about the people who previously held their own jobs. So it was people writing about their predecessors. You're on the NEC, so the National Executive Committee. So a sort of parallel organisation to the actual staff members. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about the context in which you understand this document was written, why it was written, how it relates to the Equalities and Human Rights Commission investigation, the context by which this came to light. What do you make of it all?
Well, look, I don't know all the context. Members of the National Executive don't necessarily get told all of the background. I've felt a bit frustrated that we haven't had more discussion in the NEC about our response to the EHRC. It's obviously something which is, the investigation by the EHRC, causes me, great kind of shame and disappointment in many respects to have an EHRC investigation over anti-Semitism, which, as you know, is something that I've been quite outspoken about. I think it was right that a report was drafted on looking at the internal workings of the governance and legal unit to submit to that inquiry. I think it still should be. I imagine that's the purpose for which it was written, and I don't know all of the circumstances about how it was leaked. I'm sorry it was leaked in an unredacted form. I don't think that was the right thing to do. I'm sorry that people who've made complaints about anti-Semitism are now potential targets by the far right because they've been named in a report that's gone public. But I do think that the issues in the report do deserve to be debated and to have public attention amongst the members of the party.
I just want to come in, John. Just a quick point as well. I mean, just for viewers, there's a distinction between the whistleblowing and the publishing. You're absolutely right. Anything that's publicly available and published, and if people do find a version which hasn't been redacted, I would really advise you to not share it because, of course, as you've said, there's other people's names that shouldn't be in there fundamentally. You've said that Keir has a hard job. You don't envy his job. As I understand it, I mean, Emily Oldknow was his first pick to be the party's general secretary. That's not been confirmed. He's not said that. That may not be true, but these were things that were just in broad circulation. I mean, I find it hard to believe that he would be willing to pick somebody as general secretary, but at the same time not know the kinds of things they were saying, the kinds of political values they had. And if he didn't know, if you're being sort of generous, what does it say about him as a Labour leader that he wasn't aware of the kinds of politics and machinations of one of the people he was considering for general secretary and what they were capable of?
Well, first of all, it's not actually the leader's job to appoint the general secretary. It's the national executives. He's a member of the national executive, but he's one of 39 members. So he may, of course, have had candidates he preferred, but I don't know. That's rumor and speculation, as far as I'm concerned. If he was thinking of her, I suspect that based on this report, he may be doing so less now. I think it would be very hard to sustain a case for appointing some of the people who you've been quoting from today.
Do you think that they should? Obviously, these are difficult questions. It's just come out, the last 24, 48 hours, and people obviously have a right of reply. Just to clarify, I've already mentioned the article that we published on Sunday. We approached them for a comment; they didn't reply. Do you think they should still be Labour Party members?
I think there are things in this document which ought to result in cases that come through the disciplinary process, yes. And I'm a member of the National Executive. I don't really want to prejudge the outcome of those cases, but I think that there are very serious things that have been uncovered here, or that appear to be. Obviously, there are references to emails and messages. I obviously haven't seen the originals. I have read. Well, I'm on page 400 and something at the moment. So I've read quite a lot of the document. It is very serious indeed. I think you talked about in particular about the Ergon House project that is said to have been diverting resources to particular seats where the candidates were or MPs were from the right of the party. I think that's a very serious matter, and that does require a specific investigation. Although there is information about it here, there's no financial information there, and I think we ought to know, exactly what went on, how much money was spent or misspent, and who was involved. So I think that needs to be investigated too.
I'm going to pass you back over to Michael, but before we do, just want to say you're watching Tisky Sour on Novara Media. My name's Aaron Bastani. We've also got Michael Walker hosting tonight, and joined by Jon Lansman. We've got 3,169 people watching, only 1,600. That wasn't a Priti Patel gaffe. 1,600 likes. If you haven't already, smash the like button. At the moment, people are very economically distressed. If you can't afford to subscribe or get in the super chats, don't worry. Just smash the like button, even hit the subscribe button. That's more than enough. If you can't do anything else, costs nothing, really helps us get the show to more people. And I just want to give a big shout out to, we've had lots of super chats tonight. We've had a few more here just in the last couple of minutes. £105. One from Ricky049. Wow, proof of what we all suspect and proof of what we need, of why we need Novara Media. Great work, guys. £50. Thank you, Ricky. And then another one we've got here from James McGinty, £50 again. Stay organised. Victory belongs to the most persevering. And other ones as well earlier on. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Maybe towards the end we'll get a full list of super chats and give you guys a shout out. Thank you.
Thank you to the people who are subscribed for your 1 hour's wage a month. We couldn't do without you. You're part of the Novara Media family. I wanted to ask you, Jon, about Labour and anti-Semitism. So the context in which this report was written was obviously to give to the Equalities and Human Rights Commission. Me and Aaron have mainly talked about sort of the other things we learned from it. So sort of people undermining election chances, people being abusive and bullying. And I do think that's, that's an important context to understand some of the anti-Semitism row when it comes to should we take people's testimony at their word. But in a more direct way, I was wondering if this report and the contents of it has changed your understanding of what has happened over the past 4 to 5 years when it comes to anti-Semitism in the Labour Party and the way it's been dealt with, and the reality of it versus the perception. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's not all news to me because as on the national executive, I was involved in the Anti-Semitism Working Party. That was the first body that once. I was, after I was elected, I was one of the 2 Jewish members of the NEC at the time. So I got involved in that, and that looked at how we were going to deal to process the cases, a large number of cases that we expected. And I was also involved in another working party that looked at procedures and how we could speed up the process of dealing with the number of cases. I didn't know quite then the reason for there being so many cases to deal with that particular time was because nothing had been done for a long period, which is the really big revelation in relation to the handling of anti-Semitism cases in this report. And that is extremely worrying, but it's not totally surprising because we knew, members of the NEC who were involved knew that the procedures and systems for handling cases were woefully inadequate. or were found to be woefully inadequate. I mean, perhaps at a time when you're dealing with 20 or 30 cases a year, you don't need very sophisticated systems. But as soon as we started getting hundreds and hundreds of cases coming in some cases from the same body or person, you clearly have to establish proper processes and methods of chasing progress and managing the process. And it's clear that none of those things existed until 2018. And but the problem had been there for at least 2 years. Had been evident for at least 2 years before that, and that is terrible.
And I think the perception, sort of lots of criticisms of Jeremy Corbyn when it came to this was that either he's malicious in that sort of like he's actively tolerating anti-Semitism, or he's incompetent because he hasn't managed to speed up these processes despite being leader for 3 years. And yeah, it's worth clarifying that this report never claims that people sat on reports of anti-Semitism intentionally so as to undermine Jeremy Corbyn. But what it does show is that, one, these people hated Jeremy Corbyn, and two, some of them sat on anti-Semitism claims. And that's two bits of evidence, and you might draw your own conclusions or you might not. But what people would say is that if what this document proves is that HQ was a shit show, incredibly factional, people working against the leader of the party and also sitting for very long periods of time on very significant complaints. And when I did media appearances on this, the response you'd get is either Jeremy Corbyn is tacitly endorsing this, or he cannot get his house in order. And I mean, how would you respond to that criticism? Is that fair to say, if he wasn't malicious, well, why couldn't he get his house in order?
Well, I think you've got to recognise that Jeremy didn't even have a majority on the national executive until 2018, really, the beginning of 2018, not a working majority. And when Ian McNicol was General Secretary of the Labour Party, he didn't have much influence over what happened at Southside at all. I mean, frankly, there are parts of the Labour Party's apparatus, like regional offices, where the writ of Jenny Formby has not sufficiently reached, and I think that is a problem, and I want to see not people of one political persuasion replaced with people of a different political persuasion, but I want to see all party staff being impartial people, ensuring that the internal democracy of the party is a level playing field for its members and affiliates.
Okay, I'm going to hand over to Aaron very briefly, but first of all, we're about to go to audience questions. So if you've got a question, put it in the comments now, or tweet it on the hashtag #TiskiSour, and we'll take 2 or 3 of those. While they're coming in, Aaron, is there anything you want to say while people are thinking of and typing their questions to all of us?
Are we saying goodbye to John?
No, I thought John was going to stay for some questions. Or have we said goodbye to John?
I don't know.
No, he's still here.
Good.
He's still here. Yeah,
that's what I wasn't sure. Yeah, exactly. No, I think let's just go to questions. We've been going for an hour. Thanks so much for everybody tuning in. More than 3,000 for that whole show. Massive. If you haven't already, smash the like button. That's all I've got to say, Michael.
You've got a very one-track mind, haven't you?
Mm.
I respect that. Lester Holloway. Oh, okay. So this is a comment. Lester Holloway tweet on the hashtag #TiskiSour. We need a truth and reconciliation process, and we need to make sure party staff are impartial. Oh, but actually, he's just quoting Jon Lansman, so we know that already. John said that was a very important point. I suppose you could elaborate on that. What would that look like? I mean, because it sounds nice, but I mean, I suppose there are some people who, and I completely understand it, have kind of a fatalistic response to reading this document, which is that, I mean, it makes the Labour Party seem like a bit of a cesspit, and like, how could you overcome sort of factional disputes and sort of like toxic culture when, I mean, you can't get rid of factionalism in the Labour Party because there are always going to be a left and a right, and various people with different persuasions. Like, how could you possibly create a culture and a way of working together where this isn't the kind of thing that happens? What would be the step-by-step process to overcome this kind of thing?
Well, look, factionalism on one side breeds factionalism on the other side. That's the result. I mean, when Jeremy was first elected in 2015, he had a very inclusive shadow cabinet. I know it wasn't always very pleasant, but working relations were not necessarily good because, from the very first day, or from before he was elected, there were members of parliament who were attacking him very viciously. But he did try and have an inclusive cabinet. And then there was the coup in 2016. And, there was an attempt to keep, over 100,000 members from voting. We now know from this report, we suspected it at the time, of course, that there was a very systematic operation to keep members from, even beyond those members, to keep members from and registered supporters from voting, going through their Twitter feeds and everything. And that led to enormous mistrust. And, it wasn't surprising that after that, Jeremy decided that, it was unfair to replace people who had been loyal to him, who picked up the batons like Becky Long Bailey, on the finance bill, when suddenly, after all the files had been deleted from the server, she had to lead on that finance bill. And to have replaced those people with the people who'd led the coup against him when he'd only been there for a year was hard. And then, when people were planning another leadership election, as we now know, but suspected at the time, for after the 2017 general election, because they thought we would lose. And unfortunately, they were also taking actions which probably contributed to us losing. It's not surprising that there was a deep factionalism on both sides, factional divide. And in order to eliminate that, we have to have truth and reconciliation. We've got to accept and admit that that isn't the way that a party in which we share the objective. Most party members supported the principal policies in that manifesto that we fought. Well, both ones we fought actually in 2017 and 2019. And we want to see the next election resulting. I will do everything I can to get Keir Starmer elected as Prime Minister at the next general election. I want to know that we're all going to be working for that same objective, and to keep people in the party, to rebuild the trust and confidence of the people who have seen how Jeremy was treated.
John, can I just come in?
Yeah,
because you're talking about the truth and reconciliation thing, and obviously I think that's vital for things to move on and for everybody to put this behind them. But I think as well at the same time, truth and reconciliation implies that there's two sides to this, as there is with the kind of factionalism sort of argument. And one of the default responses I've seen from people is, oh, well, both sides are as bad as each other. And I think that's an inexcusable response. When you see the things that have been said about Diane Abbott, when you see the things that are being said about work colleagues, setting people on fire, if only there was a petrol can emoji, deranged things for a human being to be saying, racist things for a person to be saying, sexist things for a person to be saying. Labour is meant to be an anti-racist party. Labour is meant to be opposed to misogyny. Labour is not meant to stigmatise people with mental health issues. And I just feel like that's just letting so many people off the hook, John, because, yeah, you need a Truth and Reconciliation Committee, but people with these views aren't progressives. And I saw a really great tweet and it said, wow, these people aren't just on the right of the Labour Party. These people are to the right of 80% of the British public, and there are structural explanations for that. We can talk about that, sort of politics by clique tends to do that. But do you not think it's kind of letting them off the hook? I mean, and also you'd say you'd work. I will as well. You know, I will obviously vote and campaign for the Labour Party and for nobody else. But at the same time, if Keir Starmer was going to, Keir Starmer, again, we don't know. It's not. It's alleged. It's something. It's an article I'm writing at the moment. I'm working on it. But it's been widely said that Emily Oldnow was his first pick for General Secretary. What does it say about Keir Starmer's ability to judge a character if that is true? I mean, why would he make such a wise choice as Prime Minister? Why is he any better than a David Cameron if you're a black person, or if you're a person who cares about mental health stigma or bullying at work?
Well, look, you're saying that he wanted Emily Oldnow to be General Secretary, but I don't know that. You know, I've read that people say that. I don't know that, and I'm not going to attack him for something that I haven't heard him say or you know, read a report of him saying. I think, and it's in any case the NEC's job to decide who the next General Secretary is. But I do think that people need to be taken to task for abusive behaviour, and unfortunately, I mean, although I think you know, the level of abusive behaviour towards the left from the right is very serious, I can tell you, if you have a look at some of the comments on my social media threads, you will see some abuse from people on the left too. So I don't think
John,
immune from it.
Can I just come in, John? John, can I just come in?
Yeah.
But these aren't Twitter trolls, John. These are directors in the Labour Party, and the thing is, you're right. They exist on both sides. But the language is identifiable as a Twitter troll, and this is somebody who is an assistant general secretary for Unison, a trade union of 1 million people. Does that not worry you about the state of the Labour movement? How somebody has risen so high?
Well, I don't want to comment on people's roles as employees of trade unions.
Of course.
But it would certainly be inappropriate for someone who behaves in the way that we've seen evidence of in this report to remain in senior positions, or even, frankly, junior positions in the Labour Party, whatever their politics. It's not because of their politics; it's because of their behaviour, and you know, it's behaviour that we need to deal with. And you know, look, if there are people on the right who behave properly, then that's fine. Whatever. If there are people on the left who behave badly, that's not fine. You know, I think we deal with bad behaviour and abuse and racism, and you know, I'm in favour of dealing with all forms of racism in the Labour Party, whether it's anti-Semitism, you know, discrimination against Gypsies and Roma, whatever. You know, and there's lots of. Unfortunately, there is more racism in the Labour Party than I think people like. Well, obviously, people don't feel comfortable with admitting it, but you know, there's more than people are willing to admit sometimes.
Yeah. We should probably wrap up. I just want to ask one final question with a quick answer from both of you, which is that, you know, there'll be a lot of people, I think, watching this, Labour members, wondering, should I just leave the party? I give up. And, you know, what one response is to say, well, look, it's the only option, so you might as well stay in it. The other option is to say, stay and you can change it. I mean, how would they change it? What would be, because, you know, this is high level stuff and it feels difficult for people to say, how can I influence this? I've seen that there's really high level staff being just as abusive to Diane Abbott as right-wing journalists. Why would I want to be involved in this? Sort of like, why should people stay in the Labour Party? And if they do, you know, what can they do to make it a less awful place than the impression this particular report gives?
They've got to be active. They've got to argue for the policies they believe in. They've got to argue for more democracy in the party, even more than we have now. You know, I think I'm disappointed that we didn't democratise the party further. And they've got to argue for impartial party staff. And look, I was in the Labour Party for decades when the right were in control. It was a long battle, but if people hadn't stayed in the party, we wouldn't have got Jeremy Corbyn elected as leader of the Labour Party in 2015. We wouldn't have stood a chance of winning in 2017. You know, unfortunately, we now know that we might have had a chance of winning in 2017 if people had behaved as they should have done. Look, I hope anyone, I think all the people who join the Labour Party join because they have a desire to change things. They want to see a transformative government. They want to see a different kind of society, a different kind of economy. And if you believe in those things, the Labour Party is the place to achieve them. And yes, we suffer defeats sometimes, and we've suffered some bad defeats on the left, the general election and the leadership election. But that isn't, but there will be times when we will win. And if you don't stay, you won't be able to help us win. I hope everyone will stay in the Labour Party and fight for things we believe in and fight for the changes in our society that we all want.
Aaron, do you want a quick final answer on that question before we wrap up?
Sure, yeah. I mean,
why should people stay in the Labour Party? What should they do to change it?
Well, I mean, I'm coming at this from a journalistic background. I'm a Labour Party member. I will absolutely vote and campaign for Labour Party in the general election. I think it's important that journalists or opinion makers or authors are actually honest about their political opinions. I think that helps people know where they're coming from. What I would say is John's right. Anybody who wants to change Britain for the better, whether it's public ownership, cares about equality under the law, anti-racism, pro-LGBT rights, that's 99% of Labour members. What makes this so shocking is that some of the people previously, until very recently at the top of the party, don't seem to embody those values. Now, look, I think John's got the right attitude on this. Hate the sin, not the sinner. Very important. And, these same people have probably done very good things in life. They're not always like this. This is them at their worst. I get that. But when you're a senior office holder in the Labour Party, this is clearly beyond the pale. I think you clearly should have no role in the organisation whatsoever. And I think it's legitimate if a member's seeing this, a regular member, gave up work in December, lost money, gave up their time to go canvassing for the party, donated money. I think it's legitimate for a member to go, why am I doing this? That's a legitimate question. And the answer I would give to them is Britain has a first past the post system. So if you want to change this country in any way for the better, you're going to have to get used to it. And the line of the establishment which runs through this country, its last trench runs through the Labour Party. The forces of reaction trying to obstruct progressive change in this country, its last trench goes through the Labour Party. John's too circumspect and too classy to say that. We probably have a similar analysis of things in that regard. But that's a structural analysis of the Labour Party, right? That's how we understand the Labour Party. But we have first past the post. So you have two things. So these people saying, why should I be in this organisation? You're owed one of two things. It depends what you think you're worth. One is justice. Are you deserve justice? Are you deserve the political party which gives you back what you give it and actually can govern for working class people? That's a just outcome. Or are you just going to look for the exit door? Now, I know which sounds easier and more tempting, but in terms of your long-term prospects, as somebody who lives in this country with family and friends in this country, you're not doing yourself any favors by leaving the Labour Party. So I can understand somebody who maybe wants to take a step back. It's been an intense few years and say, God, these people are horrific. I get it. But the long-term prospects for political change in this country primarily come through the Labour movement and through the Labour Party. Not just limited to it. You can do other stuff too, of course. Culture, cultural production, become a writer, activist, all sorts of different kinds of activism, of course. But, the Labour Party is going to be a big part of changing this country for the better. Absolutely, as long as we have our present electoral system.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Jon, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Very insightful, as I knew you'd be. And we'll get you back on soon, sort of discuss the future of momentum and the future of the left now that it is not, a self-defined leftist in the leader's office. Aaron Bastani, always a pleasure to join you.
My pleasure.
On an evening via Skype or via StreamYard, which we actually do our show on. You should come back tomorrow night at the same time because Aaron Bastani will be interviewing Adam Tooze, who is one of probably the most interesting thinkers in the world right now on financial crises and particularly the economic impacts of COVID-19. Tomorrow morning, there will be a new edition of The Burner Out. It will be guest presented by Ash Sarkar, again about Labour leaks. If you want more Labour leaks content, Novara is the place for you to be. Aaron is going to keep releasing articles. I think we've got one from Evident Code coming up. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. As you know, It is only your kind support which makes these shows possible. It means everything to us. If you are not already a subscriber, please go to novaramedia.com/support. Come back tomorrow. Good night.